Welcome to The Writing Life, the podcast for anyone who writes. My name is Peggy.
And I'm Steph.
And we're broadcasting to you from the National Centre for Writing, or Literature House in Norwich, UNESCO City of Literature. And by the time this episode airs, we will be in that lovely festive period between Christmas Day and New Year's Day, what I like to call the intermission.
Oh, the intermission period.
It's the bit where you've run out of all the good quality streets.
Yes, you're left with the really hard, chewy
toffee pennies.
And you're sitting in your pyjamas still and you haven't washed your hair in 3 days. That's where I'm going to be.
That's the one. And
Yep.
what is your favourite quality street, Steph?
Now I'm getting muddled up between Quality Street and all the other ones. Does Quality Street have a fudge?
They've all got a fudge, I think.
Yeah, I
Fudge
like a
is standard.
fudge.
Yeah.
What about you?
I like a fudge. I think I like the hazelnut swirly one.
Oh, I like a
with the
hazelnut
nut
swirl,
and
yeah.
the caramel, yeah.
This is very important matters to be discussed. isn't it?
hugely pressing.
So whilst we're waiting for our Christmas dinner to go down, and hopefully we're vegging out on the sofa or taking a nice long walk with our loved ones, I'll be out with the dog. This restful period is always a great time to reflect on what has passed and what is in store for us for the year ahead. And we have lined up crime writer and NCW tutor Julia Crouch to welcome in 2026 with us and to share her advice and encouragement for the writing year ahead.
And who better, to be honest? I mean, Julia is the author of 10 internationally published crime novels, including Cuckoo, Tarnished, The Long Fall, and Her Husband's Lover. Unable to find a subgenre of crime writing that neatly described her work, she came up with the term Domestic Noir, which is now widely accepted as the label for one of the most popular crime genres today. Julia has been a visiting fellow on the UEA MA Creative Writing Crime Fiction course and teaches online for Faber Academy and for us here at the National Centre for Writing. She co-runs the Brighton Crime Wave, a bi-monthly crime fiction night.
We love Julie. She's wonderful.
Top.
Yes. Yeah. And this is an excellent conversation that she had with NCW's Holly Ainley. And so together they discussed the many different ways to be a writer. And Julia shared her advice for getting started and staying motivated in 2026. They explore the benefits of cultivating a daily writing habit, finding inspiration in unexpected places, and being kind to yourself in the pursuit of your goals. So, grab a mince pie, hopefully you've got one left over, and let's start 2026 with a bang by listening to Julia Crouch impart her wisdom to Holly Ainley.
Welcome to The Writing Life, Julia Crouch.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, on a very chilly morning we're recording. We're here on the cusp of a new year, and it's a time when lots of us are looking ahead, and some of us might be seeing it as a chance to reset our goals or for a general refresh. So we're going to have a chat today about how writers in particular might go about harnessing this impetus, but also about the ongoing ways in which maybe the life of a writer continually holds a lot of flexibility and opportunity to try new things and to experiment and to evolve. So I'm going to start by asking you what your writing life looks like at present and whether you are working towards a particular writing goal right now.
Well, that's a really good question. Indeed, I am. I've got a novel that my working title is Wild, and I'm about a third of the way in. I know where I'm going, and I'm aiming to get the first draft done by the end of March. So that's pretty bracing. But the way I work it out, and this is what keeps me going really, is I work out how many words I have to write. I'm aiming for 80,000. Usually I go over that, but that's my ideal length. And then I work from Monday to Friday, and I divide the number of words available by the days I have available. And then I have a daily word count, and I try to meet that every day. Quite often I exceed it, which means then I have a bit of leeway to either write more words in the end or to have a day off. I also do quite a lot of teaching, and I'm quite conscientious about that. So sometimes a day is spent preparing or marking or doing things like that. So, I'm quite kind with myself. I used to beat myself up if I didn't write every day. Stephen King said that thing about Stephen King quote goes something like, I used to say I wrote every day except Christmas, New Year, Thanksgiving, and my birthday. I was lying. I write every day, including those. I'm a bit more lenient with myself, I think, because a life has to encompass more. If you don't have the support, if you are the support systems for your life, then you obviously have to, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point for us to start with, because there isn't a right way to be a writer, is there? And clearly a writing life is so much more than the act of physically having a writing habit. It's about, some days I suppose it's about being open-minded or being inquisitive, or it's about reading, or I don't know, going out and finding your writing community. There's all sorts of ways to be a writer, aren't there?
Yes. I think it's really important to actually get out and live life. I call it feeding my beast. And I will happily go and spend a day in an art gallery or a week traveling and just kind of experiencing things. Because if you stay in your room and you're just writing and you're just kind of experiencing the world through your screen, as is so easy to do these days, then you're not really doing the stuff that really helps your work. Going out, meeting people, seeing new places, smelling the air, feeling the frost under your feet today, all of that kind of getting out in the world and having unexpected things happen. For me, it's very, very important.
Yeah, and then that's what you can take back to your desk and kind of use to feel inspired. So you talked a bit there about kind of how you work out your routine week by week. But has it always been like that? Have you always been kind of very routine driven, or do you sort of also endorse spontaneity and writing in short bursts here and there?
Oh yes, I mean, I think you cut your cloth accordingly. I think I've been writing professionally now for 15 years, and when I started, which obviously wasn't professionally because I was writing my first novel, and do that in the corners of time. I had a full-time job, 3 school-aged children, and I was looking after an elderly friend who was in a nursing home, and I visited her every day as well. So I was very, very, very busy, and so I really did write into the corners. I remember kind of taking my youngest son to his band practice and sitting there while they were banging out numbers in the studio next to me, trying to finish my edits.
Did that affect the pace of your writing, depending on what they were playing?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so, you work around your life. But I've always tried, if I'm working on a draft, I do try to work. Obviously, a deadline's really helpful. And if you don't have a deadline, if you're writing your first novel, or you're not yet published, or you're out of contract. I mean, this novel at the moment I'm writing speculatively because I'm in between publishers, and I don't have an external deadline. So an internal deadline, when I've promised my agent I will finish it by, is really important to me. So I have something to aim for, and I think it's a really helpful thing for any writer to give themselves. Doesn't be realistic though. If you don't have the time to write 2,000 words a day, which is what I aim to do according to my daily schedule, if you don't have that time, then 500 words is fine. Just whatever you can, and you could do it in little 2-hour bursts or 100-word bursts. Every little bit. Again, there's a Stephen King quote about the Great Wall of China that is built brick by brick, but you can see that rude word from outer space.
But I think it's like any kind of resolution, isn't it? That a writing goal is only useful if it doesn't create a kind of unrealistic pressure, because then you know the minute that you miss a day or you don't hit that word count, you'll feel like giving up. And actually, I wonder, as you say, you are a very experienced tutor. You teach for National Centre for Writing, amongst other organisations. Is there a piece of advice that you give your students? I mean, is it that Stephen King quote, but just about kind of creating achievable writing goals?
I think my main thing now is to be kind to yourself. But I think to cultivate a daily writing habit is a really good thing to do, particularly in the early days, so that you start believing in yourself as a writer. I think that's the really hardest thing when you're beginning. And certainly I still have difficulty with it, even though I've published 10 novels now. That I sometimes think, my needs are kind of way down there. My writing time is kind of something I have to kind of fit around the edges of everything else. Actually, you have to kind of say, well, this is really important. It's really important to me. It's really important to my characters, to my words, that I actually do devote some time to it. So what I say to beginning students is, have a go at those morning pages. Obviously, that's difficult if you have a small child or a dog to actually write first thing in the morning.
Or a job that starts early in the morning. You know, there are lots of barriers, aren't there?
Yes. So if that's a problem, then look at your day and say, well, when can I do those moments? Perhaps last thing at night, perhaps at lunch break. You know, just go away. 15 minutes writing. Write anything. Don't worry about quality. Just develop that little habit of writing down. And I'm actually working on a course with a group of complete beginner writers, and they're all doing their morning pages at the moment, and or daily pages, I should call them.
Daily pages.
And for many of them, it's been a complete revelation that they can actually do that. So that's quite an exciting thing. Only 15 minutes a day, almost anyone can find that. And the other thing I'd say is, once you've committed to that, then make it like a hot date. You know, mark it out in your diary. These are my 15 writing minutes, and really just go for that. I know Dorothea Brand's quite strict with people about that, and she says in her book On Becoming a Writer, which was the basis of Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, that if you can't manage to find 15 minutes in a day, then give up. But that's a bit idealistic and harsh.
Yeah, and I think, again, 15 minutes, but it might be that some people don't manage it one day, but that, as you were saying, you might do more some days and then have a bit of free time in the next day. So
it's like being on a diet. You know, you eating a little bit of cake one day doesn't mean you've completely blown it. You know,
no,
get back on the bike. Yeah,
such good advice. And just sticking with people who might be just starting out, because I know a lot of people listening, may just be dipping their toe into creative writing. Yes. And you mentioned there a bit about your own story and how you started out. And I think that's quite inspiring. I'd like to talk a little bit more about it, because I think people, will have common doubts for anyone trying anything new. Is this right for me? Is it too late for me to start? Am I going to be any good? All of those kinds of questions. And I think, it'd be nice to offer some comfort and inspiration for those at that point.
Yes. Well, for one thing, first of all, that thing about being too late, it's never too late. I mean, I think the older you are, the more you have to write about. I've just recently become a grandmother, and that's given me a whole new swathe of relationships to look at in my fiction.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So I started in my mid-40s. Until then, I hadn't written any prose since I was at school. I'd been okay. So I had when I say that, it sounds like I hadn't written anything. I'd been a playwright and devising theatre director in my 20s, but then had completely left that behind because of the adapt and survive one has to do when one has children, and particularly if one's married to an actor whose work is sporadic and poorly paid. So I realised that and also is likely to take him away for weeks and weeks at a time. So I kind of made this decision that somebody had to stay at home and have some kind of career that was lucrative and flexible.
Is adapt and survive? You mentioned adapt and survive there. Is that basically people adapting to their circumstances?
Yes.
So whether that's a partner with a busy job or, whatever the circumstances are.
Yes, whatever your circumstances are. So I retrained and became a graphic designer. It was something I'd always been interested in, and I'd been when I was 18, it was kind of drama or art, and then I went back to the art but also graphic design, which is slightly more lucrative than fine art. So I did that. I retrained, got an HND in visual communications, and went on to do graphic design for 10 years, running my own business from home around the children, doing the classic all-nighters if necessary to meet a deadline. And it was good. And then I decided to do a master's because I was doing more and more illustration, and I decided to do a master's in sequential illustration, which was basically about using images to tell stories. And I wrote and illustrated 2 children's books for that, which never got published because they were deemed too dark. I got a lot of interest, but I never quite got past it. And if you imagine, that's the landscape back in, it was in the early 2000s when Roald Dahl was big. You can imagine.
Okay, but you were enjoying the sort of writing element there, and as you say, the sort of sequential storytelling.
So that fostered a love of. I realised that it was easier for me to find the words than it was to find the pictures, and I'd always thought I was pictures, not words. And more enjoyable, not just easier, more enjoyable. And so then I thought, perhaps I could explore the writing thing a little further. And I signed up to do some online creative writing courses with the Open University. I did an introduction to creative writing, which took in life writing, the short story and poetry. And that was great. And I really loved it. So then I went and did the next bit, which was a kind of a third of a degree in creative writing and focusing on fiction. And I just really, really loved it. And I started writing short stories, read a few out at open mic nights where I could literally hear my knees knocking as I read. But I just got the bug then. And then I thought, I wonder if I could actually write a novel. And to me, it seemed like an impossible undertaking because I didn't know anyone who'd published a novel. I didn't know any writers who'd published a novel. So in fact, when I got my deal, I was the first published writer I knew.
which is so interesting, isn't it? Because having a writing community, I suppose, can be something of a comfort and inspiration in itself.
Yes, and that's another thing I say to my students. They learn in a group. They get to know one another in a group, whether it's online or in person. And it's really important that they find their peers and they continue. And I'm still in touch with some of my old students, and they're still, they still turn up at each other's book launches and things, and they're still in touch and very supportive of one another. And that's great to have that. I didn't have that. I joined a writers group, and I actually was too hungry to do my own writing. Sounds awful. And it is quite awful, but I just wanted to spend the time reading and working on my own writing rather than reading everybody else's writing.
Which is fair enough as well.
Yeah, I think actually kind of now from the teaching end of things, I think you can really learn a lot by looking at other people's writing, your peers' writing, people who are developing at the same pace as you. It can really help your own writing. And indeed, as a tutor, I want to caveat this immediately before I say it, that I do not steal my students' ideas, but by teaching them and working with them, that improves my own writing.
Yeah, there's a reciprocal learning and exchange going on. Absolutely.
The downside is that your internal critics who sit on your shoulders all the time and say, you can't do this. Whoever told you could write? And I still have them. They're still sitting there heavily on my shoulders. They're much more well-informed now since I've been teaching. So it takes a bit more work to shut them up.
Yeah, and that's useful as well. Another comfort, I think, for people to know that just because you have that inner critic, doesn't mean you should stop. It means, and actually, it doesn't go away, but perhaps you just get more used to it. Like you say, it becomes better informed.
You develop strategies. And for me, how I got to write a novel was NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, which has since it's kind of fragmented slightly, but back in the early 2000s, about 2000 to 2014, 15, it was very intense, and it was only November. And around the world, people wrote a whole novel, 50,000 word novel. It's a kind of novella, but officially it's a novel, just about out the novella straits in the month of November. So it's like 1,700 words a day, 7 days a week for 30 days. And that makes 50,000 words. It's very hard work. But I was, again, I had this busy life and I was fitting it around the corners of my life. I remember, I don't drink now, but back then I did. And I went to a friend's wedding and I wrote my 1,700 words at about 11 o'clock, having been partying at the wedding since about 11 o'clock that morning. So for 12 hours. And
so how are your words that day?
Do you know what? Some of them actually ended up in the novel, so they weren't that bad. I was kind of, Hemingway once said, "Write drunk, edit sober," and I was certainly writing drunk. However, then don't do that, kids, because he went on to blow his brains out. So that's not good. It's not good. Don't listen to Hemingway. He said some great things, but I don't think that's one of them. I think the best thing he said was the first draft of anything is shit, which is fantastically liberating. So that's another thing that I use very much in my own head in fact, I have it in front of my desk on a postcard. It means that you don't have to get it right, you get it written. So you don't have to worry about quality. And that's the great NaNoWriMo thing that I found great for the inner critics, which was Chris Beatty who started it. His watchword was, it's quantity, not quality. And to call my first draft a draft 0 which means that it is only for my eyes. So I know that what I'm writing, only I will see it. And that makes me able to write stuff that I wouldn't normally write because I'm not worried about another eye looking at it. So that shuts my internal critics up. And I write very, very fast. I touch type. I've got a bad hand at the moment, so I'm finding it really tough because I can't write as fast as I think anymore.
That's such rich and interesting advice. There's so many different things I want to kind of pick out in there.
All right, okay.
Definitely that sort of idea of writing for you, because I think, for people starting out, there is that fear of being judged, isn't there, and being critiqued. But also I'm wondering whether NaNoWriMo or any kind of scheme, I think, where perhaps there's a collective goal and there's people all around you, whether that also helped you to kind of achieve it because you were accountable.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's the real value of creative writing courses, is that apart from obviously the top-notch tuition you get from your tutors, it's the exercises, the deadlines, the feedback, either the group or the feedback from your tutor, the accountability you have to the group that makes you produce the work that otherwise you might kind of. It's those internal critics. You might feel that you haven't got the energy or the courage or the self-belief to actually do that work. But if someone is saying, "I want that by next Tuesday," you will, because it's a force outside yourself. Once you start getting into that habit of producing work, then it does become easier.
So there's kind of a couple of ways that people could go. So if they've never written before, perhaps that goal is around just getting something down, the draft zero, they're not worrying about what other people are going to see. But if it is that they feel they're at a point where potentially they want a bit more, want to start sharing or getting some of that feedback, then a creative writing course might be the way to go.
Yes, that's not to say that creative writing courses don't work for complete beginners. In fact, I think they're brilliant for complete beginners, having done one myself, because you are exploring what you can do. And you're with a group of people who are generally at about the same stage as you, who are also exploring what they can do. So there's a great sense of discovery in those early stages. And to have feedback, and to have positive feedback as well as feedback that can help you shape your work, is really, really invaluable. You start to really understand yourself more as a writer in those kind of circumstances.
Yeah, and thinking about that kind of journey of discovery, actually, and listening to your story and kind of how you got into writing, and it shows that there is so much flexibility in this art form. And you've talked about being a playwright, writing for children, now writing novels. You've clearly experimented with genre, with form, with ways of finding new readers. I guess, how do you ensure that you continue to take advantage of the kind of scope of creative writing? How do you ensure that you don't get stuck in one place or one story? Yes,
that's a really good question, and it's one that's quite particular to me at the moment. I think that because I started out, my first published novel was Cuckoo, which my agent told me was crime fiction, which really surprised me. But, he then showed me the relative sales figures of crime fiction and literary fiction, and then I was happier.
And you found a place for your dark content, not for children's fiction.
Yes. So then shortly after that, my publicist, who was Sam Eads, who's now an editor herself, and I were having a drink, and she was saying that it was quite difficult to sell my work in terms of people really understanding it, because it was being sold as psychological thrillers, and that didn't quite do the content justice, because it's a kind of slower burn. It more starts off with a kind of ordered world and it goes towards a disordered world. And she said, "Can you think of a phrase that would kind of describe it more?" So I came up with the term domestic noir, which kind of caught fire really and has become a thing.
Yeah,
and describes quite a large branch of psychological thriller, and the literary crime crossover, and that was great. But also, what happened was that then, that's what I write. That's Julia Crouch writes these novels, and so to actually then write something different is quite challenging. And I realised that I think it's about my fourth novel, I wrote something almost completely different about a kind of a slightly dystopian cult. And my publisher said, "Oh, we can't publish this because it's not a Julia Crouch novel." So I had to go away and rewrite the whole novel, which was another year. And it was a really great exercise for me because I'd had a relatively easy ride into publishing, compared to lots of writers. And this was my difficult moment, but I came through it. And now what I want to do is move. I've had 10 of those novels published of domestic noir-ish sort of area. And each one has been different. I've set myself challenges. I always want to explore something new. I never want to plough the same furrow. I generally kind of have at some root of it, there's some kind of dysfunctional relationship. Either it's kind of between friends, women friends, or a marriage, or a familial relationships. And I've been looking at all of that. And now I'm kind of branching out a little bit. So that's where I'm kind of, it's a little bit exciting. I was going to say scary, but actually it's exciting that I'm kind of working in a different area. Just tangentially, I'm actually kind of toying around with folk horror at the moment because that seems to me very interesting at the moment. I've just become very interested in gardening and plants and the stories around them, and it's kind of led me down this path, and rewilding and things like that. And then the stories around woods and forests and the scary things in the dark and folklore. And that's where I'm at the moment. I think basically the key is to challenge yourself always, because if you carry on writing the same things, then it becomes either just a job, which writing should never be just a job, or you stagnate as a writer. So I'm always looking for fresh, new things. And I have my project of my heart, which is a more literary novel, which I'm kind of is bubbling away in the background that one day I'll finish. And so there's lots of projects going on, really.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me what you said as part of that story, that your publisher said to you, this isn't a Julia Crouch novel, and yet you had written it and you are Julia Crouch.
I know. Because ultimately I think if you have even a moderate amount of success, you become a brand in terms of publishing is a kind of it's great, and there are great people working in it, and I've been very lucky to have worked with some of the best editors in the business. Oh my God, it's difficult to say this, but ultimately publishing is a business and the bottom line has to be met. And at the very basics of it, publishers are about selling things. So I sometimes say, not usually so publicly as this, shifting units.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of branding, pigeonholing, whatever. If they think that it's easier, that it's better to, if you've established yourself in a genre, it's quite hard to move sideways because that's the selling is geared up to selling you as that. So if I suddenly wrote as Julia Crouch, if I suddenly wrote a heartbreaking love story, everyone, my readers would be reading it thinking, well, where's the twist? When does he turn against her? When does she get unhappy about this? But I wouldn't know how to write that, I have to say.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that can happen quite quickly, as you say. And I wonder, so we talked a lot about people who might be or listeners who might be just starting out writing. But for someone perhaps who is, like yourself, a more established writer, but who wants to think about a goal or an aim to try something new, but they are perhaps afraid of the change or of reinvention, or overwhelmed, in fact, by the choice of where to go next. What kind of advice might you offer? Do you think it's just about trying lots of different things and seeing what lands, or?
I think my main bit of advice would be don't write to market. So don't look around and say, what's selling at the moment? I'm going to write that. Because what's selling at the moment won't be selling in 2 years' time, and publishing works very slowly, and that's the very minimum of time, unless you get with one of the digital first publishers like Cuckoo, but that's a different kettle of fish, really. The 2 years' time will be the minimum of time from you finishing your draft and getting it sold to it being kind of out there in the world. So writing to market is useless. Write something that excites you. I think that's the main thing. And if it excites you enough, and that and the writing flows, and it's exciting enough, then the reading of it should be exciting enough. It should excite an editor. And who knows, you might be writing the next big thing, but you might just be writing something that's very solid and very exciting and genre busting. I think you just have to write stuff that grabs you.
And that's great. Yeah, that's great advice, because perhaps if somebody's wondering what goal to set themselves, it's not about word count or, something specific to craft, but it's just maybe it's write what I enjoy or write what I'm passionate about for X amount of months. That's a good one. I want to go back to talking about this idea of being stuck, because that's a place that a lot of writers find themselves in. You've talked about various things that you might do for yourself or within your writing community, but what other ideas might you have for someone whose goal is purely to become unstuck? Where might they find inspiration?
So I think what you don't do is you don't become unstuck by sitting at your desk and trying to write. If you're feeling that the ideas aren't flowing, you go out and you look for inspiration. So my favourite way of generating ideas is actually going for a run. I don't run fast, I plod. Or you could go for a walk if you can't run, or you could just kind of get out in the fresh air if you can't walk. But to go out and see things and to move a bit and to actually feel the air, put your brain into gear. Don't listen to words on a podcast. Perhaps put music on. I find music is a great inspiration, actually. I feel when I'm running with something magnificent playing in my ears, I feel like a superhero. And that gives me the confidence. And then ideas just appear. I think I've always find if I put my brain into neutral and don't overthink things, then something comes. Whether it's useful or not, you test that later. I also am a great believer in mind mapping. So if you get actually stuck on a point, and particularly with crime fiction, which is so plot driven or can be so plot driven, if you get stuck on a point, mind map it, look at all the possibilities, and out of that can grow all sorts of things. Keep your eyes open. When you're travelling around on the bus or whatever, don't stick your phone in front of your face. Look around you. Look at the other people who are probably all like that with the phones in front of their faces. But look out the window. Look at the little interactions between people. I would say carry a notebook, but I don't anymore. I used to carry a notebook all the time. Now I just carry my phone and I'll make voice notes or type notes in my notes app. And I think that I don't feel ashamed about that. I just find it's much more immediate and ready. And also because everyone is looking at their phone, it's much more inconspicuous. So, you're not sitting there kind of making notes and people are going, what's she writing about? Is she writing about me? Because I probably am.
always on the lookout for material.
Yeah. Read. Always read. And also it's incredibly inspiring is to just go back and read one of my favourite craft of writing books, because they always get me excited. So Stephen King on writing is amazing. It's so inspiring, as is Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. And those are my two favourite books that I will return to and perhaps read a chapter or perhaps read the whole thing again in order just to fire me up. In fact, I was thinking about Ali Smith's book, How to Be Both, the other day, and because I've reread it recently. And I read this amazing article in The Guardian about how she got the idea for that. She was flicking through a Frieze art magazine and she found this obscure Italian painter who painted some frescoes in Ferrara, and it kind of coincided with a novel she was reading about terrible things happening under Mussolini in Ferrara, and also something else that she'd come across. That's right, that she was trying to find a way of encompassing duality in a novel, and she'd read about when there were some floods, they'd scrape back some frescoes, which you can remove the frescoes, because frescoes are paintings that are made in plaster. You can remove them wholesale, and underneath, when they'd removed them in order to restore them, they'd found the sketches. So the idea of sketches living behind these finished paintings that had been there for centuries, and all of those things coalesced into this incredible, sparkling, exciting novel. So just that way of kind of just observing, being a magpie, sometimes being a bit of a vampire. If you're going through something very, very traumatic, as a writer, you often find yourself stepping back a bit and going, now I'm feeling like this. How does that work in my body? What are they saying at this point? In the middle of an argument, what am I saying? Oh, God, I wish I could capture this dialogue.
Just make sure that you're disguising it as much as possible when it hits the page.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, yes, you take inspiration from real life, but that doesn't mean that you kind of nick real life wholesale in any way. You can't really do that, as Raina Wynn's book, The Thought Path, has kind of shown so brilliantly that that there's no such thing really as objective truth, that as writers we always bring subjectivity to bear, even if we're claiming to write memoir. It's all about a point of view. So yes, so that also kind of sometimes if I'm stuck and I'm I'm just not feeling it about that particular bit I'm writing, I'll jump to another bit, another part of the story. Or I might do what I call field trip, which is writing one of my characters in a situation that I know is in the background of the story, but not actually going to appear in the story, just to experiment to see how they work in these different situations. So sometimes I'll do that. So I take a break from writing by actually writing. My main tip is to go out in the world and just experience that for a while and exercise, move your body, because if you are writing 2,000 words a day, even if you write fast, that's a lot of sitting on your backside.
Absolutely. God, there's so much brilliant advice in there, and I love that story about Ali Smith and where all those different influences kind of came together, and as you say, to create this really incredible story. But just one of those things alone wouldn't have got her there. So it's actually just being awake and alive to inspiration.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd love to return to for anyone whose goal or aims aren't about the actual practice of writing, but we talked about kind of the importance of having a writerly community around you. And you mentioned that, taking a creative writing course is a really great way to find people and to connect with people. If someone's not doing that, if they're not signing up for a course, where else might they kind of take that idea of growing their writerly identity with other people around them?
I would go to writer events organised by your local writing organisation, like National Centre for Writing, or down here we have New Writing South. That's it.
But lots of bookshops as well, I suppose.
Yes. Bookshops. I mean, we've got Kemp Town Bookshop here in Brighton, which is a wonderful independent bookshop, which has lots of events. They have every month. They have a 5 a.m. write-in. So you can turn up and there's free coffee and you can write for a couple of hours with other early birds. I've never quite made it myself, but I like the idea. Yeah, and look around on, kind of social media. Social media is great for that kind of thing. It's terrible for lots of things, but it's actually great for finding your community, for your a group of like-minded people. You could even, put on your local kind of area page on Facebook, for example, say anyone interested in forming a writers group, and then or just ask around friends that you have. There's lots of ways of creating a writing community that you can just find, go to one-off workshops and bookish events at Waterstones run some great bookish events.
Yeah. I guess it's about putting yourself out there, isn't it? And an element of confidence as well, which can be scary for lots of writers, but I think well worth it, because then all of the other things kind of take off from there, as you've described.
Yes. I mean, there's lots of book groups on Facebook, and there's also kind of writing festivals. Like if you're interested in writing crime fiction, I cannot recommend the Harrogate, Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Writing Festival at Harrogate enough. It is brilliant. And you get to meet, everyone mingles all together in the bar and everything, and everyone's really friendly. Crime writers, for some reason, Val McDermott says it's because we write our dark sides out. We're very friendly, a lot, and it's great. You will make friends there. There are people of all sorts. There's shy people around the edges. There's kind of the gregarious types in the middle, and everyone finds their tribe. It's brilliant.
Wonderful. That's great advice. So I want to finish off by asking you a kind of echo of what I started by asking you. You've told us about your writing goals for the next few months, and You've talked about different projects that are on the go, kind of to do with your manuscripts. But I wonder if there's something for you that is that more holistic side of your writing life that you've got in mind as a goal, or something you want to achieve. Is there something long term that we should look out for from Julia Crouch?
Well, I think this book I have in mind, which is about a midlife woman who's lost her family and is trying to find connection. That's my kind of the project of my heart, but I'm kind of working on that in a kind of it's a formal experiment as well as a kind of an exploration of a character and a situation, and that's the thing that's most sort of firing away in the background for me. But I should think that would be a couple of years yet before I come up with that one. That one's more kind of pure writing. I tend to with the kind of crime fiction, and now with my folk horror, I do a lot of planning and plotting and story work. And with this one, it's more about it's heartfelt. So it's writing into the blue, like I did with my first few novels. I didn't plot them at all. Now I'm an avid plotter for most of my work. So yeah, it's a little kind of tickly thing in the background. And I'm also very interested in screenwriting now as well. I worked on a screen adaptation of my first novel, Cuckoo, which did the rounds after lockdown and didn't get placed. Although I was working with Sister, who are an amazing independent production company, and it's still a vague possibility, and I'd love to work on that. And I'm also working on adapting my second novel, Every Value Break, with an experienced screenwriter friend. So that's something that's going on in the background as well. So we don't have any plans for it at the moment, but it would be for a feature, a full length feature.
Oh, thank you for sharing all of that. And again, just in your final answer there, so much inspiration for people to know that having multiple projects on the go as a writer, is really important and valuable, and kind of helps you have short, medium and long-term goals.
Yes, exactly that. Yes, I've always got. I've never got to the point yet where I finish a novel and I go, what next?
There's always something else.
It's which next now?
Oh, well, Julia, thank you so much. I feel like we've covered a lot of different ideas and places that people can pursue sort of in their own way and hopefully at their own pace. So I think we wish everybody luck in their writing year ahead, whether they're listening to this in January or any time of the year.
Yes, and if you make resolutions and you break them, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. You can always. It's not an absolute. Everything's like fiction. Everything's flexible.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Holly. It's been a pleasure.
A big thank you to Julia and to Holly for their time. And if you're looking for ways to find inspiration and stay motivated in 2026, we wholeheartedly recommend checking out the Writing Hub on our website, where there are hundreds of articles, videos and podcasts covering all aspects of writing and literary translation. And Julia herself will be running an online tutored course with us in partnership with UEA starting in February, all about how to write crime fiction. So I would also certainly go and check that out if you're interested in the genre and how the nuts and bolts of it work. So head over to nationalcentreforwriting.org.uk and under NCW Academy, click online tutored courses.
Run, don't walk, I would say.
Absolutely.
If you have any questions or you just want to get in touch, and we would love that, you can find us at Writer Centre on Blue Sky and Instagram. We are on Facebook, and you can also sign up to the NCW newsletter at nationalcentreforwriting.org.uk and get all of the news into your inbox directly.
And social media is where you can let us know about your favourite quality street.
Yes, please. Important questions.
The really pressing questions of our time. As a UK registered charity, we rely on the generosity of our supporters to make our work possible. You can make a donation today on our website by clicking the big Support Us button.
And if you enjoyed what you heard today, please do consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a rating and a 5-star review, because this helps other writers to find us.
Thanks again. Keep writing. Have a wonderful New Year celebration, and we will catch you in 2026, no less, on the next episode.